Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar from the UX Design Institute in partnership with Morgan McKinley on the topic of 2 to 3 years experience required to become a UX designer. How do you break through that barrier and get a job in UX? And so good morning and thank you for attending. Good morning, good evening, good night, depending on where you're tuning in from. So our agenda is we're just going to do a brief introduction to the people here in the webinar, and also just to reiterate what this webinar is about. Then we're going to briefly, our two experts are going to give us an overview of the UX jobs market and how that market has grown and demand has grown over the past 3 to 5 years. Then we're going to get into the meat of the webinar and 5 bits of advice for UX job seekers on how they can get over this barrier and get that first job in UX. And then we'll have a question and answer session where you guys can ask us any questions you want, and we'll do our best to answer them. So we've scheduled the webinar to take 45 minutes, and quickly, we'll just talk about who is in attendance. So there's myself, I'm the CEO of the UX Design Institute, Coleman Walsh, and Thomas Woods,
Hi everybody,
who is one of our education advisors. Also, lurking in the background and masterminding the whole webinar is Aoife Shanahan. Some of you may know her quite well. And our guests of honor this morning, 2 leading UX recruiters for the global recruitment company Morgan McKinley. We have Dara Boland.
Hello.
And we have Ronan McConville. How you doing? Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for taking the time to participate in our webinar.
Thank you.
So what is this all about? It really is about, it's a catch-22 situation, isn't it? For people who are trying to break into UX, what they tend to see for entry-level job specs out in the market is that 2 or 3 years experience is required. And that presents this conundrum, well, how do I get a job without the 2 to 3 years experience? And how do I get the 2 to 3 years experience without the job? And what we find is that a lot of people are deterred by this, and it presents a psychological barrier, and some people won't even apply for jobs that have this specification in there because they think that doesn't apply to me. And it's a psychological barrier, it's an actual barrier. And how can would-be, wannabe UX designers get over this barrier? So that is what we're going to be talking about today, because, you know, our advice for you, just we'll give it to you straight away, don't be deterred by this. You know, this is totally surmountable. And 2 guys, Dara and Ronan, are going to give you some advice and tips on how you can get over the barrier. So anyway, without further ado, we'll get into it. But before we get into the advice, oh, Thomas, what have you done to me? An overview of the always blame somebody else when things go wrong in your webinars. One of the tricks of the trade. So an overview of the jobs market. So Dara and Ronan, the question is over to you guys. So, you know, can you give us a recruiter's perspective on the jobs market? And one thing, you know, it's always good to reiterate to people who are trying to break into UX that this is, you know, not just a great market, but it's a growing market, and things have kind of boomed in the last 3 to 5 years. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great time to be in UX. Like businesses really investing in UX and backing design. I think what we've seen in the last few years is that like UX and design is no longer an afterthought. It's very central and right, it comes at the start of the discussion when launching products or developing products. And yeah, look, I mean, in terms of working in it, there's never been more opportunities. There's definitely a skill shortage. You know, demand is outstripping supply, which means that if you work in the space, you can demand higher salaries and have the pick of the bunch when it comes to opportunities. So overall, it's going from strength to strength. Year on year, we're seeing an increase in demand, and it's, you know, for sure one of our highest performing areas, you know, in recruitment sense. So yeah, really strong. That being said, it must be frustrating sometimes for the people that maybe are just starting their journey, because all they're hearing is, you know, there's a war for talent. People can't find these people, but there's still a challenge to get the first step in the door. So hopefully we can cover off some points that help in that today.
And Ronan, and thanks, Dara. And Ronan, just asking you, and so you must work with a lot of employers. Obviously, you work with a lot of employers. And what's the sense out there in that they, some of them maybe a few years ago weren't thinking of hiring UX designers, probably thought that they weren't that important, or oh, we can live without it, and that's probably changed for many of them. And is there kind of a sense of desperation from employers, like how am I going to fill these spots? How are we going to find these people?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember sitting down to read something kind of maybe December last year, and it said that user experience was going to be one of the biggest areas of employment in 2019. And you always greet that with a bit of skepticism, you know, like, will it? And it just absolutely has. You know, it's probably one of our busiest desks at the moment. I think where you would have had 2 or 3 years ago, you've got a company that's hiring, you know, X number of developers, 20, 30, and then one designer. You know, any sort of, you know, if you have an industry-wide situation where that's the case, there's going to be fewer jobs in the space. Now you have teams being built up of 30 people, 40 people in the user experience space, not quite on par with development, but getting there. And because of that, the number of positions has absolutely ballooned. And I suppose on that as well, what I would say is it's not just the number, it's the quality has gotten so much better. It's not a case of, okay, we want our UX UI guy, you know, as a mandate coming down from a senior person who doesn't even know what UX UI is, and they're kind of bringing someone in and they're saying, okay, go, you know, like, go bring in your designs to this process. You're now saying, okay, we need a researcher who's going to go out and speak to our customers. We need a user experience person who's going to dive into this research. We need interaction designers, service designers, UI designers who are going to, or UI designers are going to take this research and create clean designs out of it. That's an incredible market when you think about where it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that's a big change. So I suppose the takeaway from that is that the market is maturing. You know, I'm sure I've bored everybody with the story. When I moved from London back to Dublin about 10 years ago, maybe a bit more, there was no market for UX here. You know, I remember a recruiter calling me back after I sent him my CV saying, you know, what's UX? You know, what do you do? I've never seen a CV like this. I use some sort of business analyst, and it was very, you know, dispiriting at the time. But it just shows you that things have taken off. And I think, you know, Dublin is a tech capital, and from my experience, it kind of mirrors what's going on in a lot of other European cities. You know, maybe London, maybe the States are a few years ahead, but Dublin is kind of a bellwether for what's happening in, you know, Manchester, Brussels, Amsterdam, Berlin, etc. Is that you know, is that from your experience working internationally? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, it's maturing a lot. Like, I mean, if we're looking at the UX umbrella, you know, we're seeing that companies are, you know, really understanding the intricacies within UX, and finally we're seeing companies that no longer are hiring the UX guy. You know, we're finally seeing companies understand that maybe we need a visual designer and a researcher. So it's getting there. You know, we've seen huge jumps in terms of understanding and adoption and mindset change and buy-in as well from everyone. You know, everyone from, like, I mean, this hits every single stakeholder. So yeah, I mean, leaps and bounds, and you know, hopefully that trend continues.
Okay, great. Okay, so another thing we talked about, Ronan, before was this idea that companies need to adjust their expectations, in that if there's a supply issue with UX designers, and all companies are looking for 2 to 3 years experience, that just doesn't work out. And that some organizations are changing their mindset, and they're saying, look, we don't need the 2 to 3 years experience. We just need somebody with the potential, and we can groom them ourselves and educate them and apprentice them essentially to get that bit of experience.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there with apprenticeship. I think that's, you speak to a lot of like some of the best minds in this field, and they'll tell you that the first 2 to 3 years in user experience is not where you're probably going to get the most value out of a person. That comes later on. And those first 2 to 3 years are when they need to be learning, and like almost as an apprentice to the more senior people. I think where the challenge is now coming is because you have these technology companies in Dublin and companies across, not just technology, but businesses period, who are moving at such a fast pace, and they need to say, okay, we need to get this senior person in. We need someone who can start producing for us right away. The problem you have is that you don't have, say, if I want to be an accountant, I know I can go through the Big Four. I can go through these steps that will take me to where I need to go. You don't have that in user experience. And because of that, you can end up with a situation where companies are hiring all these senior people, but these senior people are just being put around senior people, and there's no opportunity for them to train the junior staff. Now, companies with bigger UX teams are realizing that, and they're starting to kind of pay it forward that little bit more. You're seeing user experience rotation programs coming in some companies. You're seeing people or businesses going to the colleges and looking for entry-level designers that way. But it's something that I think at a wider level, businesses absolutely need to address.
Okay, and that mind shift is happening, and it's not something that job seekers can do anything about. But we're now going to move on to talk about some advice that you guys are going to give to actually help people get over this barrier. And the first bit of advice is probably the most important: is that don't be deterred by the job specs that say you need 2 to 3 years experience. Even if you don't have the 2 to 3 years experience, you should still apply, because we were talking about this before, Dara, and that sometimes if you think about it from an employer's perspective, they have to put 2 to 3 years experience on the job spec. They can't say no experience required, and sometimes the 2 to 3 years experience is kind of like secret code for, look, we'll take someone who has a lot less experience, or maybe no experience if you're the right personality and you show the aptitude.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is it. I think ideally when people are writing the job specs, they probably do want someone with the 2 to 3 years experience, but whether or not they can find them is a different question. I think, like human nature, we generally want something that can, quick fix, someone that can hit the ground running. And I think there has, up until the last couple of years, and UX Design Institute has done a great job in filling that gap. There's been a feeling that there hasn't been corporate ready graduates coming out of colleges, but that's changed now, and there is. So I mean, yeah, don't be deterred. You absolutely should go ahead and apply anyway. I think it is, I think inevitably you still won't get interviews for every single one of them, and it will be testing, and it's as much testing as your mindset as it is your application of the knowledge you've learned. So I think, like anything, whether you're talking about sports or business or getting a job, it's really important to visualize the future, visualize the win, stick with it, and kind of, there's a great book actually. It's not anything to do with UX, but just anyone that is stuck in that loop of being pushed back and being told no. It's a really simple book. It'll take you an hour to read. Who Moved My Cheese? Really good. It's just, I think for people who are in that mode of trying to get the first step, I'd encourage everyone to read it. And just having the perspective that, although it's difficult going to interviews and trying to get your foot in the door, remember that, with the interviewer themselves, wants the next person that comes in the door to be the winner. So having the slight perspective change, they're not there to kind of fix your problems, but the emphasis should be on, how you're going to be the solution, that you understand what they're looking for, you have something special to offer, and you're selling to them why you're the person for the job.
And Ronan, can I just ask you another question on that? Is it fair to say that they're part of this mindset shift is that certain employers, this isn't the case of every employer, but certain employers are prepared to take a chance on someone who doesn't have the 2 to 3 years experience if they think, you know what, this person's got the right personality, they've got the right attitude, they've got a qualification, they've got a great portfolio of like practice projects. This person could have the right stuff. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair, and I think I suppose on that point, and we'll come to portfolios. I imagine there's a lot to be said there, but you have to look at, okay, what does that actually mean applying for a job? And this is not just true of entry-level people, and it's not just true of UX people. Applying for jobs is not firing a CV out online, putting it on the boards, being that person who somebody sees like, oh, this CV again. That's not a good method of job searching at any level, let alone entry level. But if I can say, okay, I'm really interested in company X, I really want to get in there. I know I don't quite have the qualifications, but find out, okay, who's the decision maker in this company? Who's the head of UX or the UX manager? Can I reach out to this person and be honest with them and say, look, I'm aware I'm not qualified. Can you take 20 minutes of your time to speak with me? Give me some advice. You'll get it. People in this industry are incredibly accommodating, and they're aware of how still immature it is. They will help you. And you said about it, it's a lot of it comes down to things like personality. They're not going to know your personality from a CV. You could meet someone, you get on with them, and they say, maybe 6 months down the line, they say, okay, you know what, maybe we can take a chance on this person in an entry-level position. So, I know it was something we wanted to talk about in terms of the networking side, but I think it's not just a case of, yes, apply. It's think, okay, how do I best apply?
Yeah, sure. How do you put your best foot forward and apply with in the best possible position? Because this is a topic we've talked about many times, and going back, we did an interview with Des Traynor of Intercom 5 or 6 years ago, and he said the same thing. He said, look, we will take a chance on people. The market is so thin that a lot of companies are prepared to take a chance on people who don't have the 2 to 3 years experience, and we've done it ourselves, and it's been an incredible success. So don't be deterred. That is the number one advice. As Ronald says, it's not just a case of flinging CVs around, but don't be deterred.
Just see a lot of questions there coming. Dara, people are asking about the book. Could you repeat it? Just
Who Moved My Cheese? It will take an hour to read. It's a really skinny book, and you fly through it. But
who wrote it? Do you remember the name of the guy or girl who wrote it?
I don't know, but I think it's actually like
Amazon. Ethan might Google it and send out.
You'll definitely find it
into the question box for you guys. At any point, if you want to ask the guys questions, just pop them into your chat box there. We'll grab questions as they come in as well.
Yeah.
Dr. Spencer Johnson.
That's the guy.
Yeah. Spencer Johnson. Right. Okay, so the next bit of advice, and this is an interesting one. So I think it twists on a perspective on its head for some people. Some people think that in my mid-30s, late 30s, early 40s, it's too late for me to switch careers. Whereas I think the advice is actually twist that around and exploit your age and your experience. Because someone who's got any professional experience, it means they've got experience, they've got maturity, they've got professionalism, they might have sectoral knowledge, they might have experience working with clients, even in a non-UX environment. They might know how to manage meetings, run workshops. There's a whole lot of things you can do to big up your application and to big up your CV. And particularly if you can draw some parallels between your experience and the role of a UX designer or UX researcher or whatever it is you're going to be applying for. Have I given the answer before I've even asked the question? But anyway, fire away, guys.
Go ahead. I suppose it's an interesting point. I just, when you were saying that, this kind of story came to my head. I remember speaking to this 24-year-old designer 18 months ago, and they'd had probably a year and a half, 2 years experience. And I remember I was speaking to them and I said, look, listen, there's this senior UX role. I'm not sure if you're quite there yet, but it is an option. And they turned to me and they said, yes, I'm interested. Set up a phone call between myself and themselves. And it was just that sort of confidence. And I thought, wow, okay, and that's great, but you have to temper that. And I think the flip side is, so much of user experience as a field, it does, like you said, it's dependent on maturity. It's dependent on ability to understand people, to empathize with people, and not to necessarily have this ego of I am the great designer.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
In terms of you know, are you at a disadvantage coming into user experience a bit older? I'd say no. I think that it would be completely the wrong idea, and I think, like you said, I don't know what you think there.
Yeah, no, I agree that UX is such a fascinating field because it's like it draws from so many different areas. We are talking about human behavior, so like, I mean, some of the best UX designers I've come across, you know, come from psychology fields. Others who come from software development, business analysts, like you name it, really. You know, so it is about finding the parallels in what you've previously done. And remember that UX, a lot of it, okay, what we see is the nice user interface at the end, but that's not all it is. It's not just the visual design. There's a lot of dealing with people and managing stakeholders, and you know, and lots to it. So yeah, like big up your experience, draw the parallels, but crucially put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes. Find out, just like you would in a UX project, what's the problem, how are we going to solve it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I would challenge anybody who's got an experience, whether they're an accountant or a solicitor or a business analyst or a graphic designer or a project manager, not to have a lot of parallels between what they do and a UX role. Particularly anybody who's coming from software development, my God, you know so much about technology and the software development process and how things actually work. If you come from a graphic design background, you've got a lot of the UI design experience. Business analysis, it's about requirements gathering, it's about creating solutions, working with people. You know, anybody who works in the technology sector would have a lot of advantage and would be able to draw those parallels, you know. So and I think particularly if you worked with the right recruiter, not plugging you guys, but great recruiters like these guys to help you tell that story, you know, and to say, well, look, I'm making a shift from a project manager to UX. It seems like they're totally unrelated, but in fact, by working with the right recruiter, they would be able to draw those parallels and make those connections.
I think it's not, I mean, you talk about it's across the technology space, a huge filter into UX. It's like the architecture. You see a lot of ex-architects going to UX design, and it's because the underlying processes and the way to approach a problem is the exact same.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of anthropologists. It seems to be a big one for us. Obviously, they got the understanding of research and user, human behavior. But even if you were like a lawyer, you know how to problem solve. You know how to take a lot of information and come up with a solution or a kernel of an idea. You know how to work with clients. You know how to be ultra professional. So I think, you know, don't be deterred again and exploit your age and your experience.
I think as well, like, I mean, if you're asking someone to buy into you as a UX designer and you're looking to draw parallels, it's really important to distill down exactly what your personal brand is about. Like, and to me, personal branding, what it means is, what are people saying when you leave the room, you know, and to distill down, do you have a mission statement? You know, do you kind of, is it in line with your personal values? Is your elevator pitch, is it there? Like, know exactly what you're passionate about, what problems you can solve. And then, you know, from that, then you can, if you really understand it yourself, then you can really put it out there, both in person and online.
And would that be like, you know, I want to become a UX designer because X, Y, and Z, and those kind of motivations have to kind of ring true to yourself and to the industry? Is that the type of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Like, know really what it is that you're passionate about. So if it is that you're a visual guy or girl, you know, you really like solving problems that result in, you know, crisp user interfaces, great. We know what you're about now, and then have it really distilled down. If you can't explain to your, like, in very simple terms, you know, what it is that you're looking for and what gives you passion, it's hard for someone, especially if you're not coming from that space, to really buy into it.
Yeah.
So distill it down.
I suppose it's what you're saying there in terms of, it's probably a common enough phrase. I think designers hear the idea of the T-shaped designer.
Yeah.
The T-shaped user experience person who has maybe a broad area of skills, but then goes deep in one area. And if you're coming from, say, an anthropological background, maybe that area is research you look at, or if it's graphic, maybe it's the visual side. You know, there's a lot of different things that can be brought to the table.
Yeah, and just the reason we have the age up there is that, you know, with age comes maturity, with age comes better empathy, comes a bit of humility, probably you're better at dealing with people and managing situations. So again, don't be deterred if you're a little bit mature, like some of the people in this room, in particular. There's life in the old dogs yet. Moving on to the third bit of advice is create a portfolio. Now, look, we could do a whole webinar on portfolios, and you guys have done events on portfolios, and it seems like this is so obvious we shouldn't have to say it, but we still have to say it. So tell us a little bit about the importance of having a portfolio.
I would say, and I can say this in the boldest terms, if I get an application for a UX role, I will spend seconds with the CV and far longer with the portfolio.
Yeah.
That's where you see where the quality is. And obviously, some companies we know are better at UX than others, but any person who you can see has developed a portfolio that, with a good degree of clarity, explains their processes, explains what roles they took on the projects, shows how they researched, how they did the research, how they did the interaction design, how they guided that process along. That's what separates a person in this market, and it is what can get you a bit of, allow you to leapfrog a little bit in terms of if your portfolio gets put in front of the right hiring manager at a good company, they might say, you know what, this guy actually has a lot of skills.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that if you haven't worked in UX, you don't have the 2-3 years experience, a portfolio of practice projects can be just as effective. Is that
yeah,
fair
definitely,
to say, guys?
definitely. And I think like the portfolio can't be an afterthought, like Ronan said. I mean, it's right. Like, I mean, more time we spent looking at that. Like employers, what we're seeing, they're looking for creative problem solvers. And when we're looking at portfolios, we want to see full design processes. So we want to see the problem at hand, sketch wireframes, user research, user testing, low and high fidelity mock-ups, the whole gambit. We want to see it all. The CV does, one piece. It tells us what you've done, but the portfolio should give an indication of kind of how you think. What's your thought process in a project? Does it demonstrate a focus on the user? It should scream that you're a user advocate. It's taking the person that's objectively looking at it, taking them on a journey, and they should be able to see quite clearly if that your decision making is a fit with the particular UX culture in the company you're applying to.
Yeah, and look, it's probably an obvious question. What if somebody applied for a role and they didn't have a portfolio?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's opportunities to have a portfolio, even if you haven't worked in a corporate environment. I think there's a big difference between kind of comprehension and application, right? By all means, you can put down in your CV that you've attended this module and you've done this. Show me, one thing I've seen done really well is people can write blogs and they'll do critiques on, say, websites, right? So this is a website, this is what I would change, I'd change this drop-down menu, whatever, right? And it's just showing your thought process. Other thing, do everything you can to get out there and try and, if you can, it mightn't be paid work, it might be a friend of a friend, it might be, something in just some connection in your personal life. But if you can do any sort of work, get it demonstrated online. It doesn't have to be, something, it doesn't have to be, a really delicate and impressive web application, just some design flaw that you see somewhere, go fix it and show us.
And it demonstrates your thought process and it demonstrates your enthusiasm. Is it fair to say that if someone didn't have a portfolio, you wouldn't even consider them for a role?
I'd say it'll be difficult. I'd say there are a lot of companies that won't consider you flat out, and they will ask for a portfolio. And I think it's a case where we speak to people who are more experienced people who say, "Oh, I haven't looked at the portfolio in a couple of years," and they view it as a burden. I would not view it as a burden. I would view it as an opportunity. The majority of people applying for jobs, it's that old adage of like show don't tell. The majority of people applying for jobs can only tell. Working in this field, you can actually show, and a lot of your heavy lifting can be done before you even walk in the door for an interview. That's a massive opportunity.
Aoife, you might send out the link to some of our students have created portfolios that we think are exemplars of what a good portfolio is. I'm thinking of Dan's in particular. You might send out a link to that. so people can get an idea that we're not just talking in the abstract, where he has put together a portfolio showing and explaining how he went through the entire process of creating an airline application.
Sure. And lots of questions there about the portfolio. I think you've kind of covered off some of these guys, but just to throw them out again, if you don't have anything, so you're kind of saying go with some practice projects and just pick something that you think you can fix, show your process.
And I think an example is, you see this quite a lot, is that, look, there is a website for booking tickets for my local railway, and it's really cumbersome, and I've redesigned it.
Yeah.
And here's a couple of user tests I did with some friends. Here's the analysis I did. Here's the wireframes, and here's the final design. And here's how I think I have solved the problem. Is that the type of thing you're
exactly
talking about?
And especially if it's a kind of thing where you went down this route and then you hit this problem and you said, no, I need to change it up and go this way. Paint the story, warts and all, and it doesn't have to be pixel perfect stuff. It can be mock-ups in the back of a pad somewhere. People just want to see that the journey you've gone on, and really that you're passionate about it. If we look at other industries, if we're talking about, okay, maybe not the best example, if we were talking about if we were a modeling agency, right? People would want to show their portfolio, right? It's what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
We're screaming that you're passionate and you live and breathe UX. Show us.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting, we did an event a while ago, and one of the very senior hiring managers talked about a person they'd hired at a very junior level, and that person had spotted a particular kind of first aid kit that they didn't feel worked. And so they had done a bit of research into what they would work in that situation. They had done prototypes on it. They had tested it with friends and family, all at just an educational level. And the company were absolutely blown away by it, because it showed to such clear detail all of the processes. And they took that person on, and without going into it, they've gone on to have a very successful career.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, just to reiterate, the portfolio shouldn't show just the shiny end product. That's not what it's about. It's designing products, designing software it can be messy, and people want to see that messy journey that you went on to arrive at the solution at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so next up, tip number 4 is network in your local UX community. You touched on this before, Dara. Go for coffees with people, get on their radar, ask them to be your mentor. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that, guys?
Yeah, definitely. Seeking out mentors is really important. Just be mindful of people's time, though. If you send someone a LinkedIn saying, "Hey, would you like to be my mentor?" It's probably not the best way to do it. Go something targeted, ask for advice on something specific, something small that they'll come back on. I read something recently where there was a study saying that where you ask for a favor from someone, the person that actually is doing the favor for you are likely to actually feel indebted to you and not the other way around, which I found was really interesting. I think assume that people do want to help. People were inevitably in I suppose your position where you're at, if senior people were at one stage looking for their start. Remember as well, look, Ireland is small. We're sitting in Dublin here. The UX community, while growing, we talk about 6 degrees of separation. UX in Dublin is probably more like 1 or 2 degrees of separation. So if you don't ask, you don't get. So certainly ask for help. If you can get in front, have coffees, brilliant. Other than that, I suppose, look, if you've completed a course, see where the alumni are. People that completed a course last year, the year before, can they, throw a rope down to you, extend an olive branch? What challenges do they go through? So even using LinkedIn as well to see where people ended up and reach out that way. I would kind of as well, just the online piece, right? It's huge. There's so much going on online and physical meetups. Meetup.com is brilliant. Eventbrite, stuff like Creative Mornings. Really good to get out there and meet people and follow up with coffees. Can you volunteer at things like Coder Dojo? Coder Dojo, most of the parents there will be working in some relation to the software industry. Maybe there's value there. Give it a go. Can you volunteer at UXPA, IXDA events? it is about getting out there, and also just, yeah, I mean, look, if you can't ask, if you don't ask, you don't get. So networking's key.
Yeah, and I think there are so many. I think every city in in the planet now has at least one UX meetup, if not multiple UX meetups, focusing on different things. And in my experience, always a very welcoming, open community, and just a great place to meet people. And people get to know you. It's that old cliche. It's not a what you know, it's who you know, right?
Yeah.
So it can help.
There's something I signed up to there recently is the Side Project. It's the sideproject.org. And the idea is that people who have side projects, maybe it's a business venture, maybe it's a not-for-profit, whatever the side project is, you're matched with other creative people. You go for coffee. I think something like that might be good to build a portfolio, or even just to get the creative, juices flowing. But yeah, networking key. Do it.
All right. So the last topic we want to talk about, and Ronan, I'm going to ask you about this because this is an idea that you shared with us, is that treat your job seeking like a project.
Yeah.
It's something with the problem to be solved, and you're going to have to go through that to get to the goal at the other end. And for example, is that focus on a company that you'd love to work for, and say, how am I going to get in there? Who are the people I should meet? You touched on this earlier on. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about this?
I mean, I think this is probably what every point we have here leads up to, is this idea of, when I want to go and find a job with this company, okay, how do I approach this? And it's taking in all the different steps. It's getting in touch with the right people in that company, even if it's just for advice. Okay, what do you look for? How can I gain that experience? It's taking care of your portfolio, making it sharp, making sure that when positions do come up that, okay, even if my CV doesn't scream out that I have X number of years experience, my portfolio shows that there's quality there and there's potential there. It's getting out to events as well. It's amazing the amount of times we would put a CV in front of a company and they would say, I met that person at an event and I actually really liked them. And right away they're like, that's your first round interview done.
Yeah.
And I think, you talk about the idea of a project. That's what it's got to be about. It's not about put a CV together, somebody even send it off and sit around waiting for the reply. Be proactive, put all those steps in place, and it's not easy.
Yeah,
but
and even when that company might not be hiring right now, it's still, getting to know the right people, getting to know their business, maybe even doing practice projects in a related field, so that when they are hiring, that you've put yourself in a really advantageous position.
And there are very few companies in Dublin not hiring at the moment. Dublin is growing. And absolutely, if a job comes up 2 months down the line and you are fresh in their minds, you're going to be the first person to get a phone call about it.
Yeah.
And there are some, there's a lot of online actionable tips here that we should be covering off as well. I think networking and reaching out to stuff is great, but there are some bare necessities, ingredients that you should include in your job search as well. LinkedIn is key. Is it up to scratch? Do you have a suitable photo? Do you have all the content up to date? Include all relevant things on your LinkedIn. If it's not a commercial grade product, you can still include it. You can embed pieces of your portfolio in your LinkedIn if you want. If you're studying something, don't wait till you're finished it to include it. Put up, till present. Let people know. LinkedIn, most recruiters, at least with big bigger agencies that have the budget for the LinkedIn products, use a premium version of LinkedIn, and in that we can see people who've selected themselves as open to opportunities. If you are open to opportunities, you got to be open to opportunities on LinkedIn. It's where a lot of people will be finding you. The old kind of reliables, putting the CV up on the job boards, you will inevitably get calls from recruiters who maybe are not educated, and your phone might, look, all of the calls won't be of value, but you might decide to just include it anyway. So it's Monster, Indeed, Irish Jobs. I get the CV up on those. Beyond that, then, it's developing a bit of clout online, and I suppose street cred in the UX community. There's a few different ways of doing that. You want to really what we're doing here is painting the picture that UX is your world, right? So the people that you're following, the influencers you're following, are they from the UX community? You know, what sort of blogs are you listening to? Reading. What's your blog roll look like? What sort of podcasts are you listening to? Go old school with RSS feeds, Google Alerts. You know, you want to fill the content that you're consuming with UX stuff. You can join LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, you know, really contributing to the community then on things like Slack channels, Dribbble, Medium, Medium's big, Reddit, all of these things, just showing, you know, that you're active in this community. And what it does is that it shows that you're passionate about UX, but it also hopefully will give the perception that the learning curve is not the same for everyone. And although your CV might look very similar to the guy or girl sitting beside you, if you're the person that's very active online, it would portray an image that maybe you're more accomplished than the person next to you.
Mm-hmm.
Blogs as well. I think blogs are really good to keep, even if you don't. If you write a blog, you could have the notion that, okay, why am I doing this if no one's going to read it? Maybe I'm only going to have 20 people read it. But from a job seeker's point of view, it's brilliant. People will Google you. You know, you can have it on your CV. It's an instant, someone will look in and say, wow, this guy's passionate, and it again will point to, you know, areas that you've critiqued, and show your knowledge and passion for UX.
I think as well on
Great
that,
advice.
you know, it's get a sense check of the outlets that are being watched and being used within the community. You know, like Dara said, I mean, one of the things we do see sometimes is we see people say, oh, my portfolio is on Behance. But Behance is more of a visual graphic design outlet. And right away, if you're given an employer, and the portfolio could be there and it could be quality, but if it's on Behance, right away, they're going to ask the question, okay, is this person more visual? Are they who we want? So
do they get it? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and it could be more a case of, okay, maybe you need to have your own website that has your own projects. Similarly, you know, Dara's talking about blogs. Where do most people, you know, where do people in the user experience space get their blogs? Medium is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about working out culturally, where is the user experience market and how do I best fit in with that?
Yeah.
And to catch all of your, I suppose, your social footprint, I've seen people either having their own website or a about.me website. They're super easy to set up, and it can capture all of your online activity in that, so that when I click into it, there's no doubt that when I see Ronan McConville's application, that, wow, this guy is really active and passionate about UX.
Yeah, so it goes back to that thing, that's your personal brand, and you're putting it out there that I am immersed in this world, and I'm not a fly-by-nighter.
Yes.
That's brilliant advice, guys. We're probably going to go stray a little bit over time, but we really want to put it up to the community. So the next, you know, I'm going to give this as long as people need, and apologies if we're going over time, but the advice was just bursting out of the two gents here. So it's just questions, and it's over to our attendees now to ask any questions you'd like.
Yeah, so
or maybe you have some.
we have some already in.
Yeah, and maybe they have some advice, or maybe they have some comments.
Yeah, so
Go easy on us.
Yeah.
just going back a little bit, guys. Travis is asking there, what about the market for freelance versus in-house UX designers? What does that look like at the moment?
I suppose it's tricky. There's a few different freelance in terms of someone who comes in on a project basis. We have, I suppose, our lens on this is very much the technology space, where we sit as part of a technology recruitment team. And on the development side, you have a huge contracting market. You know, you can, as a development contractor, go from one country to the next, with relative ease. I don't think UX is quite there yet. It is getting there. There are definitely more contract opportunities available, but there's still, I suppose, and I could be wrong here, but I thought my take on it would be that there is still an idea that companies do want someone who is a part of this and who is going to be there for this entire process.
Yeah.
And embed UX into the culture rather than coming on a project by project basis.
Yeah,
And that's not universally true, but I suppose would be my reading of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the contract, okay, we're talking about freelance, but we would see a lot of contracts, like limited contract or people that work under umbrella contracts. And for sure, there are career contractors out there that will do typically a 6-month term somewhere and then move on. They tend to go in 6-month or 12-month terms and are often extended. When we do see that, it's typically at the senior level, where companies feel that they could, come in and hit the ground running very quickly. It's rare to see the contracts at junior or even a mid-level.
Yeah. So I think if we go back to the topic at hand here, which is the 2 to 3 year, how to break into UX.
Yeah.
Freelancing probably isn't the way to go at that point. You're probably better off looking for an in-house gig where you can learn the ropes as well, right?
Yeah, I think like if you can get it, look, by all means take it. It's just that there's less opportunities at that. I think the ideal, like somewhere you can go in and cut your teeth. A lot of people, senior UX people, will look back fondly on their memories of agency side initially. They find it a great way to learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I mean, I feel if you're at that junior level, don't say no to opportunities. It's just that there's less in the kind of temporary side.
Great, thanks guys. And Adrian is asking again about the portfolio side of things. Is it okay to start sharing unfinished portfolios or kind of, I guess, practice portfolios kind of thing really with recruiters? Do you feel you see a final polished version?
Does it have to be perfect, or is it work in progress? Okay.
I mean, in terms of sharing it with recruiters, and look, I wouldn't say, I'm not a UX design manager, so they might be able to give you better feedback, but we do, I suppose the one advantage we would have is that we see a huge volume of portfolios, probably more than most people in the space would. So, in terms of, do you want to put it in front of your dream hiring manager? Probably not. But, there's nothing to say you can't run it past your recruiter and say, look, listen, can you give me some advice on this?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, once it look, I think hiring managers often will love seeing that you've taken your research entailed taking someone for a coffee and scribbling on the back, because in real world that's often what it is like, right? In big multinationals even, it might be taking someone for a coffee, have a look at this. We often think that it's a big formal process, but often it's not. So yeah, it does. You can put down sketches and stuff like that, but they do have a mind of how it's presented. A one single page scroll down doc with all sorts of stuff lashed onto it probably isn't the best. But by no means does it need to be perfect. But have an eye on, is the person that's looking at this going to be visually inclined?
Yeah, and I think don't let the great get away in the good is that phrase, don't wait till it's absolutely perfect, because you might never get there. Just, get it to a point where it's shareable, and then stick it out there. Perfect it over time, then after that.
Companies work towards minimal viable product, and I suppose this is probably no different,
Yeah. So I hope that helps, Adrian. There's another question here about just kind of the more specialist roles like UX analysts, researchers. Do they need portfolios, do you think? Or what do they look like, I guess? What would those portfolios look like?
I mean, as a researcher, you're probably not going to have, finished visual designs, obviously, but absolutely, and you can still, a UX portfolio obviously has to have some visuals in it, but it's not strictly a visual medium. A lot of it goes into the processes and the ways you approach things. So having a portfolio talking about what was the initial brief given to us? How did we question the brief? How do we take a step back and say, okay, what are they really looking for here? How did we approach the research? Why did we approach the research? Why did we choose the demographics we chose? What were the personas that came out of that? That is, there's a pretty meaty portfolio right there before you ever get into the.
Can I just jump in there and say, if you are working on a project like that, take photographs of everything. I did an interview, take a photograph of you sitting in the room interviewing someone. I went and did some research in a supermarket, take a photograph of that, take a still of your usability tests. If you're, analyzing things using post-it notes, creating a Venn diagram, take a photograph of that, take a photograph of you at the whiteboard. And even though you're not designing at that point, you're doing a very important part of the job, and some sort of documentary evidence of that, oftentimes messy process can make for a great looking portfolio.
Yeah, and I think for portfolio, look, I mean, while we still see these generalist roles, and sometimes we see job specs that we look at them and think maybe that should actually be split into 2 or 3 headcount instead of just 1. So sometimes when doing a portfolio, there might be a motivation for someone to try and cover everything. If someone is predominantly visual and coming from maybe a graphic design background, loves the visual design piece, for sure put up your experience in research. But if you know for sure that the area you want to focus on is visual, it's no problem if your portfolio reflects that.
Yeah, so emphasize your strengths,
Yeah.
your passion.
Because it will come out in the wash anyway, you know. I mean, for sure, show that you're passionate for learning, that you understand all the process. But if you know that this is the area you want to work in, it'll come out in the interview anyway. So yeah, put your best foot forward.
And as a funny aside to that, it's probably a bit of a bit off point, but there was such a kind of a gold rush for UX roles and to be the right UX candidate over the last few years. One of the most difficult candidates to find now is actually a UI designer, a dedicated UI designer with a good UI portfolio. And you're actually, if, like Dara said, you know, if that's what you do and you have a good portfolio, you're actually pretty valuable on the market right now.
Very good.
One of our classic architects here asking about just what are the first steps for an architect to move into a UX design role?
Yeah, I mean, look, you got to be educated, you know. I think the guys here would love to speak to you if you're in that position. Like, I mean, beyond that, then it's going out and setting up connections. For me, if I was looking to switch careers, I'd try and get in front of people that are doing the job. Can you find someone that's made the same switch as you? What challenges have they hit? And just before you go and invest in much time or thought, have those conversations to see if you think it is going to be for you. Beyond that, it's like there's loads online you can be educated, but for me, having something formal would go a long way to attract employers.
Yeah. And then I think it's a case of doing everything that we've talked about, following the 5 tips that we've talked about there. And, you know, for an architect to switch into UX, and we've met plenty of them, I mean, it's the design process. You're following the same process, just in a different medium, and you probably would be able to put together a fantastic portfolio. And I think any UX hiring manager worth their salt would be fascinated to interview an architect. You know, you're already one foot ahead of the competition there, I would say. So don't be deterred. You know, This is a bit of a mantra here.
And it's kind of a follow-on question, actually. As recruiters, what is the value of the certification for you guys? So to see someone that's certified or has some sort of qualification in the subject.
Yeah, look, it goes a long way. It shows that someone has, like anything. I mean, if I was interviewing someone for a job, I'd want to see, show me something outside of work that you've put your mind to and completed. So irrespective of what it is, it goes a long way to show someone that you've seen something through to completion. Beyond that, look, it's a approval. You know, I mean, for us, look, I know the quality of the course because I've been involved with you guys for the last few years, but it is landing really well with employers. Employers know it. The value of the fact that the Dublin market is maybe smaller than say any other international markets. People know people, so they've heard of it. But also, what the value of this course is that it's a practical application of knowledge as well. So you come out with the portfolio, you'll come out with real world examples, as opposed to maybe some of certainly when the first time I was introduced to UX and HCI was about 12 years ago when I was in college. And I can say for sure that wasn't ready for work. You know, experience I was learning from journals, etc., not application of knowledge. Look, it's having something there, it's plugging a gap, it's showing that you're really passionate and you've taken the time and money to invest in something, and you'll have something actionable at the end to talk about.
And I think that, you know, in terms of, I know, like ultimately a lot of roles we would deal with would be at the senior end of the market.
Mhm.
And even at that level, if I'm seeing someone who is working a full-time job and then still they're going and doing this course in their spare time, or doing any sort of further education in their spare time, that tells me right away, okay, this person isn't just doing a 9 to 5. This person actually is passionate about the field and they're passionate about advancing in it.
Yeah.
And it says a lot about a person right away.
It's personal validation as well, and even for experienced people, I know lots of experienced people that have signed up to this. It's look, it's having a white belt mentality, I think, is important in any field. Like the basics is what will determine how successful you are in any job. So going back over basic stuff is really important.
Yeah, and I think, look, of course we're going to plug our course, but any good course on UX is going to solidify, particularly if you're new to the field, solidify in your mind what it's all about, and it's going to give you the ability to talk knowledgeably about it. I think without that kind of coherence in your mind, I think a lot of people new to the field have misconceptions about what UX actually is. And if you go to an interview and you're not coherent and you're repeating some of these misconceptions, you're at a disadvantage, as opposed to, well, I am educated, I do understand this, and I can talk about it with this kind of baseline of knowledge behind me.
And I think that's one of, I suppose, we talk about breaking into UX, but I think if there was anything I would tell people don't do, it's don't assume that, okay, I was a business analyst, but I was kind of in UX, and I was kind of doing this. Know where the gaps are. Like if you want to show how your experience can relate to user experience, but be aware of what you need to learn. And courses will show you that, and courses will show you what is expected of an actual UX designer, because we're kind of getting out of the point and out of the maturity in the market where hiring managers didn't really know what they were looking for. They do now.
Yeah.
And that gives you that awareness, I think.
Right.